Hi, and welcome to today's online SpecDD training session. My name is Charles. Today's session, we're going to cover the process model in SpecDD for multiple teams. This is really to showcase the scalability of SpecDD and how the methodology can accommodate one team, two teams, or really in number of teams depending on the size of your company. So here we have our diagram from previous slides, a little bit enhanced. Okay? So we still have our input coming in the upper left of our requirements. These are your epics and your documents broken down into your specs. These will be broken down into stories and be populating the product backlogs in the lower left. They also are used to drive the testing library for your QA team. However, we're mostly going to focus on the product backlog. So in this diagram, the main distinction, you'll see there are two product backlogs instead of the previous one. Now, you can have two, you can have three, but typically, from my experience, companies have no more than two or three product backlogs. Okay? It's very difficult to maintain and to really integrate all the functions into one final deliverable working software becomes more of a hassle than helpful. So you might have two or three backlogs. Now, these could tie in to two or three development teams, or you could have many more development teams. Now, here I have seen multiple 5, 6, 7 development teams. Some are for international companies, so they're spread around the globe. They are not necessarily co-located in the same city or even country. However, you have your product backlogs tying into creating the stories and being populated into the sprint backlogs to drive each sprint for one development team. You will only have one sprint backlog per development team. Sprint backlog does not span across multiple teams. Your product backlogs will always be less than your development teams or equal to your development teams. It doesn't make sense to have three product backlogs and only one development team. Okay? So it's either a one-to-one or one-to-many ratio coming from product backlogs to development teams, never from many to one, never the reverse. Okay? So we scale in SpecDD by simply allowing more development teams to work on specific product backlogs across the globe. Okay, so you might have your one product backlog supplementing the populating the sprint backlogs for your Dev 1 team and your Dev 2 team, and then your product backlog 2 populates the sprint backlog and your development team for the third group of people. However, even though you have many teams, the deliverable that they produce is just one working software. Now, this working software needs to have all of the features and functions and defect fixes that came from the multiple product backlogs. So many times there is a need for an integration team as well in order features and functions together and make sure that code from the first development team 1 doesn't conflict or break something from your development team 3. Okay? So it is still the one working software that's delivered that is then used to update the documentation. Again, a very important piece. Updating the documentation is our second deliverable. And then this one piece of working software is passed off to our QA team or teams. QA teams can also have multiple teams. They test this one working software, though, for its defects, which then come back into the product backlogs. Okay? Now, if your defects or your versioning of the working software has grown, is extremely complicated, I have seen scenarios where the product backlog 1 is simply new features, and the product backlog 2 is only defects. However, if you're smaller, there's really to do it this way because the prioritization of two product backlogs, simply distinguished by new features and defects, is no different than the prioritization of one backlog, distinguished by new features and defects. Okay. So really the main driving reason behind having multiple backlogs is specifically for multiple teams located in different countries across the globe, or for different sets of functions and defects. So, for that integration piece where we need, if we have multiple teams, this is how SpecDD provides that continuous integration. We need to apply testing from each team. Okay? Each team is responsible and needs to test during the sprint. They need to apply the testing during the release milestone. And it's very beneficial to have automated testing for each component that's developed. This is typically done through some sort of QA testing tool, but it doesn't necessarily have to wait until the end of the QA team to do. Each team, development team, can run really tiny auto-testing software for their own particular function or feature, and all this little testing really adds up and saves time that the QA team doesn't have to do. The continuous integration piece is illustrated as follows. We're creating user stories and specs to help quantify the work of the continuous integration. So it is an additional piece of work that needs to be done. It's not just the integration itself, but it's creating the user stories and specs for the integration piece. However, while some may think that creating this additional piece of work is extra work on top of already extra work, the main benefit is that you then get to better estimate and you get a better understanding of what the entire process really takes. Not just developing for the sprint and developing the working software from the stories, but the integration piece that goes into the working software as well. So this creating user stories, this quantifying, this estimating really helps the team, product owners, everybody really, to better understand the timeline and the amount of effort that's needed. Part of this continuous integration tests the integrated product. You may have multiple features in this one sprint developed across multiple teams, and each team within their own little bubble writes the code and it works perfectly. But the moment it becomes integrated, something conflicts, something inevitably breaks. Therefore, the testing of the integrated product is also very important for this continuous integration to succeed. In the same venue as before, we want to try to deploy as much auto integration as possible. We want to try and automate as many components of this repeatable cycle, and this really helps with the sustainability and the successfulness of this process in SpecDD. Okay. We want to construct this testing environment. Maybe even constructing the testing environment could be something that's automated. Automatically set up an environment for the testing, and you deploy your auto integration within that testing environment. And finally, the last piece of the integration, of the continuous integration, is simply testing the final integrated product through the delivery to the end user. This is usually incorporated into the sprint review, where you have your working software, where all of the features and functions and defects across multiple teams has already been integrated. So you have your one deliverable, your one working software. You deliver this to the end user through the sprint review meeting, where they can then review and accept or reject. That is our continuous integration for multiple teams, which SpecDD can definitely scale up and accommodate for. So now we'll do a quick training poll, and this is a training poll across all of our previous sessions, so it's not just limited to this one session. So hopefully you haven't been skipping around, watching multiple or watching different sessions. But for this training, pull out question number 1. What does the product backlog contain in SpecDD? We have our accumulated defects from QA teams, customers, and any members. Or does it contain the staging stories and tasks with effort estimated? Or maybe all the stories that were once created but have been delayed? Or does the product backlog contain all the requirements that have yet to be defined? Okay. Yet to be defined. Put any answer and see what y'all get. Our second question for this training poll: what is true about a requirement spec? It is a broken down requirement with end user value. Its time remaining is a roll up from all the stories and tasks. A story is a backlog item, but a spec is not a backlog item. True or false? A spec must be associated with test cases. And finally, a story must be with details before a child task can be finished. True or false? A story must be with details before a child task can be finished. So be sure to put down your answer, and there will be an open discussion. Okay. So that's the end of this session. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you next time.